Thank you very much. Glenda and I are honored to sponsor the program. I've known Diane for a few years and so particularly happy to do that. Diane Bywaters got her bachelor's at the University of Kansas and her master's degree at Washington University in St. Louis. She's been a professor of, she is professor of art at UW Stevens Point, and she's been there on the faculty since 1987. As you see this up here, one of the factoids that was in the paper is that Diane has been selected as artist in residence more times in the national parks than any other artist. I think that itself speaks very well. She's done Mesa Verde, Grand Canyon, every place, as the paper said, from Hawaii to Alaska. So her record as an outdoor painter and so forth is wonderful, and I'm going to be immodest enough to say one of her paintings graces our dining room. So we're very, very happy to be able to have her with us. But one fact not in the paper that we need to say is that in the time Diane has been at UW Stevens Point, she has won both, and think about this, both the Outstanding Teacher of the Year Award and the Outstanding Scholar of the Year Award. So with those credentials, Diane Bywaters.
Let me turn this on now, okay? Sorry about that. You guys on? No? Yes? Okay. So thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Glenda, for sponsoring me, too. I'm glad to be here. I was here several years ago. We can't figure out how many years ago it was, but it was many years ago. And I'm pleased to be back. And it's a good excuse to start looking at my work in a different way. And I'm a little older and have different interests. And if you remember, it's about the spirituality of the arts. And so I also started. Here I am working on location. And should we hit the lights? Yeah. Thank you. What I didn't know at this location is this is one of the most photographed locations. I just drive and they stop and jump out of my car and start painting. And at the time when I looked, I heard some noises, and in fact I was carrying on a conversation with someone behind me that had come up. But I didn't realize there was an entire busload of people behind me. I was giving like this great demonstration and I had no idea. It gives you an idea how kind of spiritual, I would say, the experience is for me. It's like when I go out on location and paint, I'm trying to catch a sense of light, work as quickly as possible. You know, I know it's going to be changing as fast as I can paint it. You know, that cloud formation is going to be moving on. So I'm very intensely. One of my musician friends said it's like a performance. It's not like practice. And I said, yes, it is like a performance. That gives you a list of the artists in residence I've been at, and a few of the international ones too. The Rocky Mountain National Park, I've been there twice. Very lucky to have gotten that one twice. Okay, this isn't the best image, but I started traveling and I wrote a university grant to go to New Mexico. And I remember painting on location and thinking, I cannot believe the university would pay me to come out to New Mexico and paint. This is just the most wonderful experience. And the place I was at is a little light. It's a really old piece, and it's on, I took it off of a slide, so the image isn't the best. But I was thinking, this is the most beautiful place in the world. Just so thick. And I remember being very prayerful, that thanking God that I was even there doing that. And as I was sitting there, it takes me about 3 hours working on location and to get the scene. I noticed these cars driving on this little road and then coming back. And then finally I noticed that they had a bunch of stuff when they drove by me, and when they came back it was empty. And I realized I'm on the road to the dump. And, I'm on the most beautiful place in the world. This is a detail of that image. And And you can see that sometimes I'm actually coming in with, is wet on wet, a la prima, as I call it. And it's very wet oil paint, and I might come in with a pencil, like I did in the tree, to define that a little bit. I also like to sign my name when it's still wet, so I get more of a signature. Another piece, there's a lot of history, and I know I don't have that much time to go into my whole life, but I ended up marrying my high school sweetheart. He went into academics too. He ended up with a PhD in English literature. I ended up with an MFA in painting, and then he decides that he wants to marry one of his students, right? So I was like crushed. This was my high school sweetheart. But the one thing I kept thinking about this experience, what do I like most to do? And it was to travel to paint. What he liked least to do was travel. So I thought, okay, now that I have this divorce, I'm going to travel and really paint a lot. And so this was actually created when I was participating in a workshop out east. And I was thinking, it's a really pretty large piece, and I was thinking how in our lives we all have storms. But, they do eventually move on. And, the good times looking back is really helpful, and also knowing that eventually the storm will move on. So it's a studio piece, but inspired from pieces I've done on location. Then, actually, anticipating this divorce, I didn't understand what was going on, and I remember sending this piece to a gallery in Chicago. I was lucky enough to get a gallery affiliation at 25, which I look back and think, oh my gosh, it was a really great gallery. James Cicero, she's now retired. And I remember sending this piece, and she called me, divorce, and she goes, what's wrong? What's going on with you, Diane? How are you? And I said, I'm fine, Jan, She goes, I'm really concerned about you. And I said, why? And she said, this is pretty dark. And I said, oh, nothing's going on, right? I just thought, she's crazy. And when I look back, I thought, oh my gosh, I think my soul was trying to tell me something, prepare me for what was coming up, and I just didn't understand it at all. So she said, she ended the conversation going, after I assured her I was fine, it's going to be hard to sell. I said, oh, okay. And she ended up selling it to General Motors because the president at the time thought it was indicative of their meetings, right? And he thought it'd be great. So after my divorce, I thought, I'm going to start traveling a lot. And one of the first things I did was go to Temecula, California, and I've been there twice. When I drove up, I thought, oh my gosh, here's a child in the Midwest, born and raised in Kansas City. And now I'm teaching in the Midwest, and I thought, how am I going to capture these weird colors and these weird forms? But it turned out to be just a really amazing situation. And from then, I started going and applying to national parks. And I had applied to one, which will go unnamed, but I still haven't got in, but I haven't applied lately. I have to admit, it's been years since I stopped applying there. And I remember somebody from that park calling me up and said, I don't understand why they don't pick you. You make sure you apply to various places. Okay? Various other places. And so I did, and I applied to Royale National Park. It was a great park to have my first experience at. It's considered a very rustic park, and if anybody can make it through Royale National Park, they can do practically anything. That's the image it has in the national park. I'll put it here and see if that's better. And so I was able to get it, and they were very concerned at me that I was going to be there by myself. And they said, once you get there, you have no transportation, you have to bring everything with you. And I kept saying, I was raised camping every other weekend. I think I'll be okay. Very, very concerned. Don't you want to bring someone? I said, no, I really love the solitude there. What was so funny, it wasn't that secluded to me at all. I did have a canoe for transportation, but a 2-mile walk, and an easy walk, I might add. There was the lodge. So it was, and I could even shower there, so it wasn't that secluded. You did have to filter your water. I took a big hike up to be able to take this view, and you could actually see Canada in the distance, which I thought was really pretty wonderful. But it gave me quite a reputation to be able to paint there and then start applying for residencies. It was September, the leaves were beginning to rot. It was a very nice experience. You got a little tiny turn-of-the-century cabin. The fireplace was your heat. You filtered water that you got out of the lake. It was really nice. I've been twice at Rocky Mountain National Park, and unlike how rustic it is at Royale, this is the lap of luxury. The cabin's over in the bottom part. It's, I like to call it a party cabin because you could have hosted an amazing party there if you wanted to. It's a wraparound, beautiful porch, and I knew I wanted to do this painting after the first time I was there. It was, I knew if I got there, I could buy a 2-foot by 8-foot piece of birch wood, and then I'd be able to prime it and do this panoramic. So this is actually done on that porch. And what I do on something that big, I can't do that in 3 hours. Right? I have to work sections, so I'll start on the left-hand side and maybe do a foot a day, right? Hoping that the sky or things stay similar. Then the last day I kind of pull it together. And this is another one of the Rocky Mountain National Park. This was my first residency, and it's on a Lakeshore. And so they run in sizes like 32 inches to 80 inches, and then I started expanding to the lower folding doors. And they're 17 by 80 or 60 inches or something like that, or 72 inches. So it was really, it's the size I can lift up by myself. I can get on location. I'm putting this up on a rock and then painting. Rocky Mountain National Park is very interesting in the fact that it used to be, if we went back to the other panoramic view, that used to have like 2 golf courses in it. And so one of the wonderful things that the National Parks has done is be able to reclaim the land and let everybody enjoy it. So if I'm on location at a national park, typically it's 2 weeks. I might do 20 paintings and a large painting. Okay, so the large painting, I would be going out at the same time a day, multiple days, and then I'm doing all these little paintings too. So it's highly prolific. I'm not having to juggle my academic career at that time, and a student advising or anything distracting. My family is tucked away in Stevens Point, so I'm just on location painting. So I also had the pleasure of going to Arcadia, Maine, and working on that. And that's the painting I donate. What the National Park expects is a presentation, something like this, right? I usually talk just about my national parks experiences, and then they ask for a painting donation. It was a lot of fun to be able to go there. This was, however, like into September, 1st of October. It was getting very cold. I remember being miserable on location, just miserable. And I actually hated this painting when I got it done. And a friend of mine was watching me, and he goes, "What do you mean you're going to be donating that painting? It's like the best one you did." And I said, "But I was so miserable. I don't want to see it anymore." So I sent it off to them. But it is an opportunity to get your paintings into the National Park collection. They'll take great care of them. Costa Islands National Lakeshore. This was my first and only painting on location bear story. I've seen bear around the cabins in Denali and stuff like that, but I was sitting on location and sitting within these rocks. And I remember seeing this, what I thought was a large dog coming up the beach. And actually, they don't allow dogs, so I don't know why I was thinking it was a dog, and I thought, wow, that's a big dog. Looked up again, and I thought, wow, that's the biggest dog I've ever seen. I looked up again, and now he's like between me and, like the third row. And I go, oh my gosh, it's a bear, oh my gosh, it's a bear. And he probably saying the same thing. He thought I was a stone, right, or a big boulder or something. And so he finally takes off. He was supposed to be running from me. That ranger had said, oh, you won't see anything but a butt and a hind leg. But I was looking right at him, and I'm thinking, you're supposed to be running, what are you doing? And he was thinking, the rocks are talking. So after that, I ran to, the only inhabitant had been there 80 years. He was grandfathered into the park and knocked on his door, and I said, I just saw a bear. And he was looking at me, I was looking at him. He goes, come in for a cup of tea. You need to settle down. And then he said, I saw the footprints on the beach. And he goes, in 80 years, I've never seen a bear. Right? And I thought, what a wonderful, special moment. And I wanted to do this other view, which had a little bit of cliff and Sand Island, I think it is, peninsula there. And so I take this huge, big hollow core door, and the rangers were making fun of me when I bring these doors with me, planning to do a little construction work, are you? And so I take it on top of my head and walk around the bend, right? I didn't realize that the water was going up and down and up and down, and I was worried I wouldn't be able to finish this, but I was finally able to get over there and get it finished. Indiana Dunes, not all my residencies are wonderful, and I would put this into a case of not so wonderful. They had a rape the week before, and as a female, on location, it's the only park I ever did call out twice and say, "Are you sure I can't bring my dog?" And I didn't know about the rape, but so there's something about it that I was uncomfortable with. And so they didn't catch the rapist, and while I was there, just a block from where I was standing, the ranger station got robbed. Oh, so, wow. Really questionable area, but a very pretty park the same, but I never felt quite comfortable there. Voyageur's National Lakeshore. I got there and I thought, oh my gosh, looks just like Wisconsin. You're driving all this way. It was very similar. And I think it's one of those national parks. Sometimes I really like National Lakeshore. I think that it's better from a boat than it is on land. And I said, next time, make sure you have like a houseboat that you give us artists and residents. A small piece. I go back and forth from these small to these larger pieces, mostly in oil. I really like to work on oil on location. It's a real easy material to manipulate. And I was inspired from that log, that smaller piece, so I went to a larger scale. And that's sometimes because of the weather. If it starts raining, or I know in Mesa Verde it was so windy, some days I weren't able to get out. And another one that I was not real comfortable with was Buffalo River in Arkansas. And I'm originally from Kansas City. My uncle was in Arkansas. We grew up seeing him all the time. And so I really thought I would be, but Ku Klux Klan had moved in, and they were using the park a lot. So I, as a single woman staying in a very secluded cabin, I was just very uncomfortable. And there was like thousands of little rocks. I don't think you can really tell from the slide or this image. And I started these little pebbles, and a few days into it, I'm thinking, what am I doing? I still have a million to do. But I still kept working on it. Sometimes you get yourselves into these fixes. So that's the first image that I showed, and then down here is a painting that was done for them. And this is Montana. This is actually the Blackfoot Indian Reservation that is adjacent to Glacier National Park. And, I'm sitting there with my car pulled up, leaning against the tire painting to get this fire that I thought was just quite beautiful, though destructive. But for a painter, it is quite beautiful to be able to paint these fires. And a ranger, not ranger, but a sheriff pulls up and says, "Oh, I thought you were changing your tire." And I said, "No, I'm just painting." He goes, "Well, have a good time." And I'm always amazed how embracing people are on location. It's really very quite lovely. Two Medicine Lake was a wonderful place to work, a very quiet place. Visitors tend not to go over on the other side of Glacier. And another one of the Two Medicine. And when I was there, I was able to talk to Native Americans that came to talk, and my two children that sat down next to me and said, "Can we paint with you?" And I said, "I only have one surface." And they go, "We'll use these." And they picked up my napkins, my paper towels, and said, "We can just paint on these." It was the first time I did it. And I mentioned that to one of the rangers, and he said the Native Americans have such a embracing of the arts with their experience that they just want to sit down with their elders and create. And I thought, wow, this is a wonderful thing. They weren't going to let, not having a surface, a professional surface to work on stop them. And it was really wonderful to see. And then another Native American stopped by and told me about how they identified the mountain as like a grandfather. And I thought that was a wonderful story, and how when they carved the scenic drive into the mountain, that it was very hard on them because they were actually scouring up something they thought was very sacred. Hawaii Volcanoes National Park on the Big Island, and talk about a very spiritual place. I was amazed with this. I got to Hawaii and I had never really seen these vents. What it is water will hit the hot lava underneath, and you'll get these steam vents that are coming up on it. Very, very mysterious, very wonderful. The Big Island of Hawaii has 8 ecosystems, so you could drive 20 minutes, and you know, one place could be raining and miserable to paint in, and 20 minutes later you have a totally different feel of the landscape. It's the only place I've ever walked into the Department of Art and Design and said, do you have any job openings? I don't want to go back to Wisconsin. It was really a lovely location. And you'll see me working on these wood, and you'll see me also working on paper, okay, and for the paper it's still oil paint, and I have to prime it and gesso it, you know, anything about painting. And I tend to tone it with a color, too. That cliff right there with the steam vent coming out, it's the natives of Hawaii would actually give offerings over the side, and they would consist of food, usually. When I was there, I thought, I believe in anything and everything, because it was just so mysterious. Denali National Park and Preserve. By now, I'm pretty cocky with artists and residences. I've traveled everywhere, and I thought, oh, this won't be so bad. And she kept warning me, and I kept thinking, oh, I can handle it, right? And the National Park in Denali almost got the best of me. I'm in the wild wilderness section, and so it is, I don't know, an hour and a half to the city, or not the small town of Denali, right? And so you're into the real wilderness section. You have this log cabin that has like 9-inch nails on the shutters going out. That's to keep the animals from going in. Right. It's 100 degrees there. Like rangers had never been in their shorts for 4 years, right? They were wearing shorts. It had gotten really warm, really clear. It was beautiful weather. And it's one of those places that you have to have water brought in. You have an outhouse to go to, and I'd driven, you know, all day, you know, and it's 9 o'clock, and it's not dark, because it's Alaska, it's still night. I go to the outhouse. The first night I'm there, I come back, I fall down, I lacerate my leg, and now I'm thinking, okay, it's Sunday night, it's like 9:30, right? In the evening, if I find a ranger, he's going to be obligated to take me into Fairbanks, which is the nearest hospital, because there's nothing going to be in Denali except for walking clinic. And so it's one of those things that, you know, sometimes I've cut myself and thought, oh, I wonder if I should have stitches. Well, I cut myself and I thought, I have to have stitches, right? And so it was a pretty bad laceration. And my husband, who never worries about me, he says to me, oh, on the way out to go to Alaska, he goes, here's a little emergency kit. And it's truly a tiny plastic bag, right? And, you know, it's one of these like tiny, tiny plastic bags. And so I thought, I bet you in there is a needle and thread, right? And I'd gone through the first aid kit, and there wasn't anything that would be appropriate. And I wish I had brought super glue, but I hadn't. And so I actually lacerated my leg with needle and thread. And then I laid in bed and thought all night, I'm a wounded animal, and the bears are going to smell this, and they're going to come get me, right? And I'm going to die of infection, right? If I don't do that. So the next day, I got in my car, drove all the way back to Denali, and the doctor looks at me and he says, after looking at my leg, what medical profession are you in? And I said, I'm not, I'm an artist. And he goes, this is a doctor that he has this fishing hat with lures on it, right? So he's not there really for the medical thing. He's there for the wildlife and fishing. And he said, you did as good a job as I could have. And I thought, well, I'm sure glad I didn't find you last night. And I became famous at the park. You know, I was like a sight for the rangers to stop by and see my scar. And they tell me, oh, I can't believe that you did that. The nurse and him were having a conversation, and I could hear everything they were saying in the next room. And he goes, do you know what she said? I told her to come back in 10 days. and I'll take those stitches out. And she said, well, if I put them in, I could take them out, right? And the nurse goes, we need more women like her. McKinley, Mount McKinley, you aren't supposed to even be able to see. I saw it almost every day. It was just ideal weather to paint. There's a national park exhibition that I've been participating in the last 3 years, and it's just a kind of a Milwaukee local type of thing to participate in. But it's connected with activities at Wisconsin Lutheran College, and it's a former student of mine actually that teaches there, and she's invited me in. This year is going to be mountains, the theme, and I'm going to use the Alaska ones to participate in this show. It's a nice opportunity to get them out and get them framed up again and have them seen. And what I love especially about it is that she works with minority kids during the summer in a camp. And they will always talk, and they come into the gallery and talk about the pieces and which one is their favorite piece. And some of these kids have never thought to even go to a national park. And so I think it's a really nice service that she's doing. So I've had 3 sabbaticals, which is a lovely look in it. Sounds like a luxury down, because I think we suspended sabbaticals for next year and maybe the following year. So I'm really lucky that I've had them. And one of my sabbaticals was the Great Divide, and I actually painted on the sections from Rocky Mountain National Park and all the way down. It was really a nice opportunity. Here are some of those paintings, and you've seen some of them in the slides. And, I'm exhibiting, and this was one of my favorite exhibits. I exhibited with Bill McKee, who's from this area, and we were at the Riverfront Art Center, and he did these, they're actually hat molds, is what they are, and I thought they worked with my work just beautifully. Nice paint. This is his first shot. So, he had just gotten in. And I exhibit my work at galleries, and this was one down in Springfield, Missouri. My sister lives near Springfield, so any excuse I can get down there, I will. And this one gallery, Walnut Street Gallery, handles my work down there. And she actually invites me to her property. She has a hobby farm, and lets me paint on her property, which is lovely. And then this is me being a real frustrated mother. All right, this is the Blue Ridge Parkway, North Carolina. This Hidell Burks Gallery in Charlotte called me up and said that they had gone to one of the art expos down in Chicago, Navy Pier, and couldn't find any artists, and then started doing this strip of galleries and had discovered me, and they wanted me to come in and paint. And these are Southern women, and I said, I just had this child, and I'm not going to do this, right? I'm nursing, I can't go out on location and paint. It's not a good time. And they said, well, we're really opening this gallery. They called me 3 times, convinced me to come to the Blue Ridge Parkway in October with my child, and of course my husband had to come too, because I had to be juggling her nursing, and we actually pulled it off. And it was a very good gallery affiliation, and really kept me painting. It'd been really easy to turn to my child and just kind of focus completely on her. But this gallery was very demanding about me coming out in the fall and coming out in the summer to paint at Figure 8 Island. So did a lot of exhibitions, I think 6 solo shows altogether at their gallery. And this is what they had invited me. Figure 8 Island is a private island. Pamela Anderson, won't vacation there. I haven't seen her, but some big name people have property there, and they would turn their lake home or their beach home over to me, and then I just fill the hallway, the bedrooms with all these wet paintings, and then I'd leave, right? And then they would come back when the gallery directors would come back and collect all the paintings. So it was a great stint while it lasted. I really enjoyed the trip to North Carolina a couple times a year. They also got me this fabulous commission. It was 16 inches by 16 foot. And the architect was building the facility, and he had made a specially curved wall for my painting. They expected me to do this on paper until I pointed out, well, it has to be under glass. It's going to be tricky to curve a piece of glass. Why don't I do it on like wood? And so I did it on a piece of mahogany. And it was a great commission to have. They actually called me up after my painting was done, before I shipped it, saying the wall turned out to be not quite 16 feet. It's a little less, like 3/4 of an inch less. We miscalculated. Would you mind cutting your painting down? One of my colleagues goes very arrogantly, he said, "You wouldn't do that, would you?" And I said, "Yes, of course I'm cutting it down. What am I going to do with a 16-foot painting?" Right? So I looked at what side I wanted, and I actually cut off one of the sides, had to re-sign my name, because I cut off my signature, had to repaint that. But I'm glad it's there. And this gives you an idea how I'm working. So this was a beautiful piece of mahogany, just gorgeous piece of mahogany. It took me about a week to get up the nerve to just paint it. And believe it or not, I tone my paint, and many times we'll work on this kind of magenta color. So that's just the gesso that I am working on. And then you can see it slowly developing. Those paintings up above are actually color Xerox of my paintings, right? Because I'd sold those paintings, but I had gotten color Xeroxes of them and put them up there, and they just kind of inspired me. Now, Wisconsin Percentage for the Arts was a wonderful program, and it was wonderful for me because I was able to, place my larger pieces. And this piece ended up at the Veterans Memorial Cemetery Chapel, and I know perfectly well why they would pick my work, because here we are saying goodbye to our loved ones, and my pieces will give them a solace to, take a breath and realize there's hope. And this is the close-up of that painting. And it is actually, people think they're Wisconsin, but it's the park that I was raised in as a kid. My first husband said to me, well, when he finally agreed to go there, way into our marriage, he said, well, no wonder you're a landscape painter. This park is just beautiful. And it is. It's a tiny park, but it's geared for the trout fishermen, and my father was a trout fisherman. And this is one of my favorite places to fish as well as paint. I painted this scene numerous times. Here's another one of the painting. It changes every year, and it's pretty artificial. When they're bringing these boulders in to get this rushing water, the trout oxygenated, it's just really an interesting place. This is a close-up of that painting. It's a little crane there, just in a couple brush strokes. Usually I'm not doing birds because they don't cooperate, but this crane literally came 5 o'clock every day, and I thought, if you're going to stand there every day I'm painting, I'm putting you in. And what I didn't know, my sister's a birder. She said that they're very territorial, so it didn't surprise her a bit that he was there every day. I've been in international residencies too. This is, actually it wasn't a residency, this is my first experience. I thought, okay, I'm monolingual, but I want to start painting over in Europe. How should I do this? And I found out about a workshop for professional artists that didn't involve any instruction. And so I went and had a fabulous time at Assisi. And then while I was there, I made sure I checked out some other residency opportunities, and I found one that was through the University of Georgia program, and they go to Cortona every year, and so I was able to paint the next summer in Italy too. I have a 16-year-old daughter. She's never been to Italy. You'd think that I would have taken her, but I am so scared of letting her, out in Italy with those men, right? So she's never been. She's going to grow up a little bit more before I'll take her there. But I love Italy. It's a beautiful place. It was like crazy quilts, just crazy quilt of lovely land all fitting together, and tile roofs. It was just really amazing place. And then I had an opportunity to go to France. Actually, I'd written it in that I wanted to paint in France for a sabbatical, and I thought, well, how am I going to do this? And thankfully, the Temecula, California residency, I think they've only done it once. For 1 year, they offered an exchange program in France, and you had to be a former residency of Temecula, which I had been there twice, and I was lucky enough to get selected to go. So it was 3 months in France. And when I got there, I was really disappointed because it was really in the town, very big city, and I had a studio in this facility right here. But I need to work on location. And this is my studio filled with my paintings. Not a very good image, but it gives you the idea. how big the studio was. Residency was right next to there, so I was able to look out my bedroom window and see my paintings, which I think is an ideal situation. So when I was there, I was thinking, how am I going to do this? Because I really need a car. And at the time, I think it was $900 a month to rent a car. And for me, on sabbatical money, that was just, it could have been $1 million as far as I didn't have the money, right? And I thought, this isn't going to work. Well, the director contacted a person that supported the residency, and he turned out to be a Hertz rental car guy. So he came in and he said, I'll exchange car for 3 months for some paintings. That was it. You know, we had limited language issue, you know, to make any kind of contract or anything, we didn't. And I just said, sure. Right? So I got a car for the 3 months, and he came in with his wife, and they picked out 3 paintings, and that's all they asked of me, and then they left. At the end of the residency, it was a wonderful situation. The Lakeshore Mountains are really quite beautiful, and I would be out there thinking I was all along, and all of a sudden a paraglider would come through. It was just really, parasailer, but it was just really pretty amazing. It reminded me of Assisi a lot, with a little crazy quilt of colors for the land, but also these really nice female shapes of the mountains were gorgeous. I have had a residency at Birdcliff Art Colony in Woodstock, New York. And this is the view off of Frederick Church's home. And when I pulled up, I thought, boy, I don't think big enough. Frederick Church actually created a pond over on the left-hand side. You can't quite see it in this painting, to balance with the river there. And what a view did he have. It was just amazing. And another upstate New York one is Art Omai. It's in Gent, New York, and this is one of those large hollow core doors. Did a ton of work. I didn't know when I applied that they only accepted one landscape painter a year of the 30 artists they select. And unlike most residencies, I'm usually isolated. This was a group of 30 artists. What a hoot to be with them. And many of them were foreign and had never been to New York and had limited language. And we found over ping pong and dancing that we all did fine, and a lot of drawing on sketch pads. We were able to communicate. It was lots of fun. And then, I wanted to explore New Mexico. And I'd gone, remember, earlier to New Mexico where I was on the road to the dump, and I wanted to go again. And this time was actually a Grantide Road. My nephew had been killed in a car accident. He was drunk driving. And he luckily just took out himself, but he was 24 years old, and our family was devastated. I didn't think my sister, her only son, only child she has, would ever have recovered from this. And I'm glad to say she did, but it devastated her family. So I was thinking, what do I want to paint? I was so sad and so grief-stricken. And I thought, well, he died in New Mexico, and I love that state park, and we used to vacation together, him and me and my sister in Missouri. So I'll go back and kind of embrace both places with my art book. And this is at Ghost Ranch, and this is one of those larger paintings I did there. And then I did this installation, and all these paintings here. This is actually Missouri or New Mexico, and right through here, this one up here, is actually the path my sister and her boyfriend, then now her husband, created. They had property, they have 80 acres in Missouri, and they were both so grief-stricken, and no words could possibly be said. Nothing made any sense at all. And so what they did is they just started making a path, and they just moved boulders. And so now they have this lovely path up this hill. And so this is like Luke's path up here, and then they ended up burying his ashes there. So New Mexico, and then this is actually Missouri. And then I did a self-portrait, and it was in a studio piece. I had found these hands at an antique store, and it was in this box, and it says, "Please ask for a helping hand." And I thought, well, that's pretty appropriate right now, right? And so I got these kind of religious statue hands out of this box. And then I had these little specimens of geological rocks that were tied to little stands, and I thought that was appropriate. I repainted my paintings. Within this painting, you can see this is that trail right there. You can start matching them up if you wanted to. And then right here is the little glimpse I had to get out of this grief that was just so overpowering. And that was symbolic, supposed to be symbolic of my daughter. Because she was, she is the flower of my life, right? And she was 5 at that time. And, it was life-changing for her as well to lose someone she loved so much, so suddenly, and so senselessly. But soon after that, I could start getting back on a trail of some of the painting adventures. And this is sorry, I keep moving it slightly and we'll go back. This is a group, I didn't know anybody on this group. I just knew that they were having a painting adventure and they were going to do their whitewater rafting of the Grand Canyon, 220 miles. So I thought, great, I'm going to go with this group. And so I was able to get on board and I worked out, I lost weight. I thought, okay, I'm going to be really strong. I get there, I'm the youngest person on this group, right? And I thought, this is unbelievable. This is the guy who was leading us down. He's an outfitter. And I would ask him how old he was, he wouldn't tell me. I think he was in his 80s, right? There was a 70-year-old woman in this group too. And it was her first of 2 trips she was taking to the Grand Canyon. Once you get bitten by the Grand Canyon in this experience, I can see why you take 2 trips, and spend all your money doing these trips. Because it was really a wonderfully spiritual experience, a renewing experience. And this is me on location in the Grand Canyon. And having to change my format quite a bit because all of a sudden there wasn't the vistas, right? You're looking up instead of horizontally. And you're unloading the rafts, you're assisting cooking, you're putting up your own tents. There's really no privacy, right? Which was interesting. And a couple other ones. The last morning I took down my tent, and underneath my tent there was a scorpion, right? And the guy said, there's a huge scorpion. And he came to the outfitter and he said, that's the biggest scorpion I've ever seen. Oh. And I loved the Wisconsin Arts Board. And now they cut back because of the financial situation in our state. And it's a shame. I got this $15,000 Wisconsin percentage for the arts to create something for the West End National Guard. It's a competitive process, okay? So they expected a marquette, and so I made a little marquette of this. And then my colleague, which I went to talk to about building a little marquette because I'd never done it, he laughed at me. He said, I'm building you a 3D animation. This is just a couple stills from that 3D animation. And it was zooming through the space, proposing my ideas. Stopped for some reason. So, and these are actually photos that we dropped into this 3D animation. And they were most impressed with my 3D animation. It was before 3D animations actually came in. This is the final project installed. There was actually 2 paintings. There's this one here. It's a helicopter rescue, and I knew I was competing against 2 sculptors. And when I came, I proposed, I said, what you need is a helicopter out front. So I hope you someday do that, trying to dismiss the sculptor's ideas. And what you really need is some color in this very bland environment, right? And so I proposed 3 very colorful paintings. And I had actually picked spring, summer, and fall. They came back. This I thought was so perceptive. And they said, we insist that you do the winter scene. We don't care what other scenes you do, but you have to do one of them winter. And I said, why? And they said, well, because it's the seasons of life. We get called in when it's a desperate situation, and most of our rescues are not successful. So we want you to embrace the winter of somebody's life, too. And I thought, oh my gosh. They had taken my paintings and taken them a much more meaningful step than I had. And obviously that structure around it was supposed to be reminiscent of a medic facility. Medic stretcher bars, or not stretcher bars, that's a painting thing, stretchers, medic stretchers. And that gives you an idea of that other one. And then I got an opportunity to go to, I don't know how to describe it except maybe a think tank for academics, and I was the person that's chosen from the UW system, and it was at UW Milwaukee, and there was representatives from other areas of schools in UW Milwaukee, other departments, and we talk about the 21st century. And my idea was to, I can't believe, I wrote this thing 3 different times, and finally I said, what I want to do is I want to paint outside my office window. And I was still teaching part-time, and I was going to Milwaukee and painting, and luckily they had a view out of their office window, and it especially had the steeple here. So I did a lot of these paintings with the steeple. And then I did one large commemorative piece of the experience. I don't know if you know Dick Schneider. He died recently, emeritus professor at UWSP. He saw this painting and he looked at it for a very long time, and he goes, "Diane, it's a great painting, but just take out the steeple." And I thought, oh, that's why I painted it. I've never taken it out. And I was thinking about all the religion and spiritual connections I've had, and I've traveled with the Wisconsin Lutheran College several times. I've been to Iceland with them, which is the lower painting, and I've been to Costa Rica with them. And actually I've had wonderful dialogue with this very conservative church affiliation. And the reason I travel with them is because my former student now is an associate professor at Wisconsin Lutheran College, and she always invites me. So it's been a really fabulous experience, and traveling with her kids are so much nicer than UWSP's kids, I think. They're a little bit more conservative, you know, they don't get in as much trouble. I went on a London abroad trip with my students, and boy, they were in trouble all the time. And these kids are pretty nice, very conservative. And also Gentile Arts Residency, it's a private residency. It's actually an heir to the Doubleday publishers. And she has so much money, she didn't know what to do with it, so she decided to build an artist colony. And it's a beautiful, we called it the Architecture Digest home. It was stunning, filled with art, filled with antiques, and it's just for artists. She has another beautiful home up the road quite a bit. But they pay like $100 a week for groceries. They take you into town. This is in Wyoming, just south of Sheridan. And they let you paint. And so these are paintings that I did on location. I actually did the one below on location, and now I think back, well, that was probably not a good idea to be standing outside while it was going to storm. Then my mother died, and I was able to spend time with her last month of her life. I had gone out she died in October, I'd gone out in August to see her. I took my daughter out there. She was in Montrose, Colorado. And I was able to take a little bit of family leave before my sabbatical. And I was able to see her and spend 3 weeks before she died. And it was an amazing experience. I got there, and my sister had been taking care of her, and she'd been doing all the medical stuff, and my sister's an RN, and she was going to keep this woman alive no matter what. And she had 4th-stage cancer, and she did. She kept her alive for me. And then when I got there, my mother turned to me and goes, "You know, I'm not going to get in that wheelchair. I don't want to be an old lady." And I said, "Well, with your diagnosis, you might not have to." And I think she thought, great, someone's not going to force me to eat all the time and keep me alive. I can go out the way I wanted to. And I saw a woman that was very bitter at the world about having the hand that she was dealt, and it turned to a very loving person. And I wish my siblings would have been able to do this with me because they remember some of the odd things my mother would do in her life, right? And I got to see her just get rid of all, I called it onions. She had gotten this onion skin, and she was, through that just 3 weeks, I got to see her pull off that onion into this amazingly loving creature, which is really her true self. And over the years, she just piled these layers on her to protect herself. And it was just fabulous. And then I was really struck and I really felt my hand of my nephew with me. And I remember words popping into my head that saying, "Don't worry," and Diane, she'll love it here. She doesn't have to wear clothes. And I remember him saying that, and my mother had to come. And she raised me very conservative. We were raised Southern Baptist, right? And we all trooped into church and sat on the second row. But she, at 50 years old, right, she decides to move out to Montrose, California, got a divorce from, or Colorado, got divorced from my dad, and became a nudist. Well, this was not the thing that you want your mother to do, right? So, you know, and I'm sure this is what influences works. I also teach life drawing, okay? But I was so driven to paint these very large-scale nudes. And this is an 8-foot painting. It's actually it's 8 foot high, so it's a little longer than 8 foot. And this is my favorite that I did at that time. And talking about how that vulnerability, about how you don't get to take anything with you when you die, and it's just you. All our trappings are gone. And this is a close-up of a detail. I have another detail shot. These are actually done in acrylic. They're studio works. I started in acrylic because I was taking them on the road. It's a really strange thing to say. Why would you take these on the road? But I would go online, and my family wanted to go down to see my father-in-law, and I got online and found a figure drawing group, you know, that I could bring these paintings, unroll them, and work on them while they're there. And so I went to Philadelphia with them, with another figure group, and we were going there. So I just worked on these paintings, you know, all over the United States, and then come home and work on them some more. So. And this is the installation of the pieces. I loved the great responses I got from them. I remember a former student came in and he goes, "Who did the big figurative work?" And I said, "I did." And he went, "Ha! Yeah, who really did the big figurative work?" Everybody was so convinced I could only do landscapes, right? Even though I taught life drawing for years, right? So it was very interesting. But I was kind of dissatisfied with some of the faces I was getting, and I felt like I really needed to brush up on, you know, trying to capture a likeness. And so I enrolled into a course in Belgium. David Cassim, who's a New York artist, that I really admired his work. And we spent a month on one pose, right? These were little evening quick things I do to occupy myself, but this is the major painting. We did a drawing over here first, and it took over a week, and then we transferred it like an old masterwood. We used thin paints like an old masterwood in developing these paintings. And it was very interesting. And then since then, I will pick a student that I just like the look. And I find it's real interesting. It tends to be a person of color, right? She's half Hispanic, and he's obviously African American. And I'm going to draw them in our clothes. He was clothed too. He was shirtless. And I get to sit there and talk to them and get to find out all about their lives. It's just fascinating. And it's a very kind of intimate thing, and I mean this in a healthy way, not in a perverse way at all, to be able to draw portraits. You really get to know your model, and they do you. You know, there's dialogue going on back and forth, and it's just pretty fascinating. Did another sabbatical show called Human Nature, and these are some images of those. So I lived through my nephew's death, and then a few years later, my mother's death. And then the sabbatical show was very embracing to be able to put those in. I also had another opportunity to sell another piece to the Wisconsin Arts Board, and this time the university purchased a piece. Now, if you go to the university in Old Main, my paintings are all over there, but those are because I donated them to them. And this time the ROTC, they had percentage of money they had to spend for artwork, and they purchased one of my paintings. And then they were so great because they were going to have a half wall, and they were going to bring the painting down. When they realized the painting would look better up, they built that wall up so it would hold my work. And then the interior decorator, usually the painting's the last thing people think about it, but the interior decorator had not purchased the furniture yet, and she went out and matched my rocks to blend with those chairs. So it looked really beautiful. A colleague of mine, Bob Stowers, who's now retired, is a woodworker. And we had spent so much time in Europe on different trips, him with his Polish wife and me, you know, doing another adventure, and we decided to collaborate on one. And when I was creating the slide lecture, I thought, oh my gosh, we made a temple. Isn't that odd that we'd make a temple, right? But certainly on those religious connotations. and the sunset. And this hangs at the university just because we never sold it and we didn't have a place for it in our own homes, and we just stuck it in the university. Oh. These little medallions were my favorite part of this whole piece to make, these little tiny medallions. They're about 3 inches big. Some more New Mexico pieces. And, you know, I'm taking my paints no matter what I did. There's Beyond Outdoor Women, organization that is headquarters at the university. And so I went on a horse packing trip near Yellowstone and brought my paint. And it was funny because the guy who ran it contacted me and said, "Oh, you actually managed to make my evaluations." They said that I brought class to this trip. And I thought, he goes, "Because of the silly paintings that you were doing, little tiny paintings. You aren't going to be able to make a big painting when you're on a horseback trip." And this Mesa Verde National Park. So, some of those things, and it blew and blew and blew. For the park painting, I don't have an image of it, but it was actually I ended up with a still life of postcards doing it because there were so many times I couldn't get outside because it was blowing so hard. And then I always try to tie my painting and my love for landscaping to my classes. And this is one of my students painting on location. She sold that painting on location. She was the happiest camper I'd ever seen. She was going to move. She's still in Stevens Point years later. But she was, at that day, she was going to move to a beach and just paint and sell her paintings. She was so happy. And then I created a course with a geologist at UW Manitowoc because there was some grant money that if we combined our efforts, and so her geology class would meet and work with my painters. They'd learn how to paint, and they would talk about the geology of the area. And she's passed away, and that's morphed into a landscape painting class in the summer that I teach for 2 weeks, and it includes a camping trip. And I have another educational scientist that teaches it with me, and we've been having a great time. So these are some examples from my students' work. We try to go to different parks, and I also try to take them down by the river so they can see that element of man on the landscape. And in my beginning painting class, in the fall, I'll take them out. Practically first painting, I think it's the third painting, to take them out to paint. And then in the spring, I wait until the last painting to take them out to paint. And then my daughter, who's the one over in the right-hand side, isn't she cute? Probably my best creation ever. She's now 16, she was 5 there. She got me to start doing stuff with her classes. And she wanted me in her classroom somehow, and I kept throwing out ideas, and I finally said, "How about if we just go outside and paint?" She goes, "That sounds like fun." So we did that a couple times. This one was when she was in 1st grade, and another time I didn't put images in, but it was when she was the 5th and 6th graders. When she was in 6th grade, we did Finding Yourself in Nature. And we created this buddy program that for years I just take my students over there and we'd draw at Jefferson School. My students needed it as much as the students at Jefferson. They needed to have little kids going, "Oh, you're such a great artist," right? And I didn't realize that they needed to hear that so much. And Thomas Moran, father of national parks and landscape, right, has this wonderful piece. And this, I thought of the same piece when I was doing 1st graders and saw this one. I think it's a tree. And then I started teaching this year. I was selected to teach a 1st-year seminar class, Arts as a Spiritual Journey, and we did this collaboration piece. I have had the pleasure of going to Mexico City for the Day of the Dead. That was this past, about a year and a half ago. Wonderful opportunity. And I did it with Michael Deming, who has introduced me to 3-dimensional work. He's a painter, but he's turned to 3 dimensions. And so I got to see the Day of the Dead, experience the Day of the Dead, which is just a lot of fun. Wonderful holiday that is embraced, and you get to, communicate with the dead, by giving offerings of food. And this is my 1st-year class, and they were really into this project. And this is the gallery, and we built an altar, and we were one of 3 altars that were built. And this thing right here is all made of food products. So there's peas, there's Epsom salt that we dyed purple, 2 shades of purple. This is actually cracked corn. This is sugar. Oh, I can't remember. Black is the black beans, right? So yeah, they were totally into this project. First year seminar is supposed to make them kind of come together and know each other. It's a great way for them to be introduced to the school and hopefully make some friends in the process. And this is one of my weird creations, and I brought 2 more of them. And these are the 3D things that I've been doing, and I mentioned that Michael Domingue. And it's more of an excuse to get together mostly with these women, middle-aged women, that love to travel as much as I do, and go to exotic places, and we make art, and we make art very seriously. And Michael will have a theme, like, I think it was ventriloquist, right? So this guy, I have this little tiny hat, and you can actually go up and down, and it actually, his little mouth goes up and down, right? So, and I thought it was great that I finally got to use, like, you know, a deer antler to embrace my Wisconsin experience and create these really funky things. And I haven't made sense to him. One of my students said, oh my gosh, I remember making some really creepy things like this. I was going through a really dark period of my life. And I don't know. I don't think I am. I think I'm pretty up. But it's so much fun to have fun. It's also so much fun to collect this stuff, right? And I know I have a great time with this group of women that tend to go on these trips with him. This is my downtown Stevens Point studio. It overlooks, unfortunately, Shopko parking lot. I would love to be able to say it has a beautiful scenic vista, but it doesn't. But it's a nice big space. Here's some of the collectors over the years, and those are mainly through galleries over the years that I've been affiliated with. And here me on location. I did, once again, any of you want to contact me, you're certainly welcome to. And I did bring 2 pieces back there. The theme on the second piece, or those 2 pieces, was a vampire hunting box. And I thought, what a dumb theme, right? But I know Michael Domingue well enough to know that he'll attract some of the better artists I've ever worked with. And he'll show me a great time on one of these exotic trips. And this was down in New Orleans. And I had not visited New Orleans. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go. I had just a blast doing it. And I made a vampire hunting box. And actually I made 2, one for a child and one for adults to hunt vampires. So when I was checking into the hotel, the people were real excited. So you're with that vampire hunting group? And I said, yeah. You know, it's all these middle-aged women. They're checking in. I don't know what they thought. And they said, do you really hunt vampires? And I said, no, we really don't. And they said, oh, that's a shame because we were going to invite you to come when the vampire group comes to check in. And they usually come in about 6 months. And I thought, oh, wow, how funny. It turns out that my husband, and this is such a wonderful supportive group, these women will give you gifts when you arrive. And I didn't realize this was going on, and I didn't participate the first time I was on one of these trips. My husband has heard about so-and-so gave me this gift, and they're very generous little tiny things that they had picked up, and usually you'd incorporate it into your artwork in 3D, in some 3D fashion. And so my husband had heard it. My husband's Tom Daling, you should invite him in sometime. He does a great lecture too. He's a goldsmith and jewelry designer out of Stevens Point, Lear's Jewelers. And so he said, I have a bunch of silver. Why don't I make silver bullets for y'all? And I thought, oh, this is nice. So I made these beautiful, solid silver bullets. And on the ends of them, he put Vampire 2014. So I was able to give one of these vampire bullets to all these women. So the woman that has the vampire shop in New Orleans came to see our boxes at the end. And she noticed the silver bullet. And she didn't say anything at the time. She contacted one of the coordinators, and she said, I think that's Diane's husband that made those. I'm not sure. And she emailed me, and I said, yeah, he made them. And Tom had a great time making them, but he makes high-end jewelry, you know, really high-end jewelry. And so she goes, would you make me some more? And would you make a way for it to hang on the neck? And so Tom agreed to it. And now she's sold all those and wants him to make more. And he's been contacted to make a lot more. And he goes, I can't do a lot of these. He's put a no to that. But he decided to work with the vampire woman. And he laughs and he goes, this is so, first of all, is she a real vampire? I don't think so, but I don't know for sure, right? Yeah, I think she's acting the part. And then he goes, this is so much fun. And it is. There's some, kind of embracing our childhood or something to be able to do this funky, weird stuff. And so he's made several of those, and he's sold out of those down there, and now she needs more. And the other day he goes, I'm going to be making a bunch more of those for her. And so he's dying to get down to New Orleans and to meet this woman that owns this vampire shop. So you never know what one thing will lead to another thing that will benefit from him. He's having a fun time doing something that I just never really dreamed that would be possibilities. Make silver bullets to hang around your necks in case you're vampire hunting. Before I did the figurative stuff, I joined. I had drifted away from the Southern Baptist upbringing. As you can imagine, if you're teaching life drawing, that's really not hand in hand with the belief system. So in my academic world, I drifted away from the church. And then after my mother's death, I decided to join a church. And I had been church shopping for years. I'd go to church and never commit to anything. And I told my daughter that we're going to look for a church. And I went online and I found, I thought, oh, there is a person that is a physicist, PhD in physics, and also is a minister. So whoever he's teaching, or wherever he's ministering, I'm going to go to that church. And sure enough, you might know him, Jim and Mary Trainer. Jim Trainer. And so I went to the church, and Maya was with me, and we walked out, and I said, I love the church. How about you? And she goes, I love it too. And we joined that church, and have been active ever since in the Episcopalian church. And I was that closeness to God, I felt, when my mother was dying, and see her transform into such a loving creature right before death. She taught me never to say never. I never could do anything. I can't do this. She'd say, can't never did anything. And I'm first generation college educated. That is ended up as a professor. So it's all very interesting to see my life take together. And I'm getting waved at, so I must be over time.
No, let's just open it up to
questions.
Q&A.
Okay, sounds good.
Anybody have any questions? Comments? Yeah.
I just have one. My wife is a professional artist, does a lot of outdoor painting, and she's pencil art and oil, watercolor, and everything. And wherever she puts outdoor painting, it can be just perfect to what you're looking at, but you always have one or two little birds way in the background. Is that something that's just she's caught on to do? Is that her hallmark, or do some people do certain things with painting so they can identify it?
I don't know. It's not something I would do, right? Yeah. So it's neat that she does that. Yeah, I'm sure her collectors always are looking for those.
They're always
birds.
Eagles flying way in the distance.
Okay. Yeah.
Why do you use magenta as a background on many of your landscape? What makes that different from, say, putting a gray or some kind of neutral color?
A neutral color would be fine too. And but I'm painting really, really fast, right? And if I skip a place, there'll be just this polka purple or blue or magenta coming through, and it looks like I painted it, right? So I kind of like that color. It also warms up all my colors a little bit. For a while I was very systematic. Okay, I'm going to have cool piles of colors and warm colors, warm piles of surfaces to work on. And then I found myself just leaning towards the pinks. I do work a lot of gray too, but I do like those pinks. But I tend to like early evening, late afternoon, early evening too, to paint. That's my ideal time to paint. Yeah.
Well,
hello, another artist. How are you?
I'm a bit of a history guy, and you didn't really talk about any artists contemporary or in art history who really move you. And I guess I'm kind of greedy because I want to maybe get some names I've never heard before.
Yeah, you've probably heard of them. I think Jim Butler is an amazing artist. Jim Wynn is an amazing artist. He's an Illinois artist. I really admire Dan O'Neill. You can never get him to talk. I think that's amazing. He keeps a very low profile, but he's outside of Stevens Point. He has no online presence at all. There's one collector who collects his work. It's a patron that lives on the banks of Wisconsin. lives in Milwaukee on the water, and it's like a museum to him. He's an amazing painter. Do you know him?
No, I don't.
Yeah,
Well,
he's
I've
just-
heard of him. I think
Yeah.
you might have mentioned his name when I was
Yeah.
going to Vermont.
He's a figurative painter. He's just exceptionally, and he's going blonde, which is really awful. He's like my age. So.
Do you know the work of Dave Neek?
No, I don't.
You maybe should.
Okay.
He's a Milwaukee artist who paints at his family property north of Green Bay in the middle of winter with
Oh.
flashlights at night.
Oh,
And he also, I first saw his work at the Dean Jensen Gallery. He had a show called 26 Nights in the Desert. He had a Dia grant to paint in New Mexico, and he basically slept in a tent during the day, painted at night, the stars, the night sky.
That's lovely.
And you can see his work online, and
Okay.
NIEC. But and he's a tree trimmer in the summertime. That's how he makes his living.
Wow.
He's not an academic. I wanted to work with him from the Vermont program, but they wouldn't let me because he didn't have an MFA. But
That's a shame.
it's a big regret of mine.
And his name again?
David Neek, NIEC.
Yeah.
Is there another major show on the horizon?
The figurative work, I want to expand. I have 2 more pieces that I'm working, big figurative pieces, and then I was going to check on galleries. It used to be that I would get a gallery and they'd say, I have a show coming up, and I would paint for that show. And then one of my mentors recently said, you should be painting and then show the work. And so I'm trying to do it the opposite way than I usually do. When I was putting this together, I thought, gosh, I work much better when I know there's this pressure, this heavy pressure to get this done in a specific, state that I go to paint. But, it's a nice.
If you could get on a plane next weekend for looking,
I'd go to Hawaii. I would definitely go to Hawaii at this time of year, right?
I loved Iceland. I was shocked with how nice Iceland is. Who's been to Iceland?
Yeah, isn't it amazing? It's amazing.
But I think I just like islands. And I think about it, I really am attracted to islands. So, yeah,
It'd be Hawaii. It's amazing. Somebody else have questions? Yeah, hi.
If somebody who's never painted wanted to learn to paint, where would you tell them to begin?
To go someplace to learn to paint, or
Read a book,
read a book?
watch a DVD, I don't know.
there's
what
a
do you do?
lovely new book out. It's Alla Prima, Everything I Know About Painting. It's a really big book. There's a copy in our library. It's like a $70 book, so make sure you check it out at the library at the university or something. And it talks about a lot of things to do. My landscape painting class doesn't have any prerequisites. It's a hard way to learn to paint, but people have said, oh my goodness, I've learned a lot because you're painting every single day. And any tiny opportunity you have to do that. Another place is Jack Richardson's in Kimberly, Wisconsin. They have some nice classes. That would be a possibility too. I think it's a great place to buy some supplies in the bargain room, and also to take a class there. So, and yeah, I definitely recommend those ideas. And any kind of workshop environment.
Would kindergarten be a good place to start?
Yeah. That would be good too.
When I was doing projects at that grade school, I discovered that in 5th and 6th grade, they have already made up their minds if they're artistically good or not. I was shocked, because I was seeing them every year, and we'd always do something, and I had no one was complaining. Everybody was into it. And then in 5th and 6th grade, it was like, oh, they're an artist, I'm not. And I thought, what happened? I don't know what it is, but it's just so disappointing to realize how early we make this decision.
Well, let's give our speaker a